Hey everyone, welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Lindsay and I am one of the counselors here at Moon Prep. And today we're going to be talking about key changes during the 2024-2025 BSMD admission cycle. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to like and subscribe to get more great BSMD and college admissions news. All right, so this week we're doing something a little bit different because I was not able to recruit a fellow BSMD counselor to do this podcast with me. And I wanted to make sure it got out because the cycle just ended and a lot of people are starting to prepare for the next year's cycle already. So I just wanted to get this out there real quick. So this will probably be shorter than usual, but who knows? So bear with me and hopefully stick through because I think that there was a lot of changes in like the BSMD and BSDO admissions landscape. First, what to discuss is going to be new and canceled programs. So like every year we do see different programs that will get added on for the last couple of years, like IU Indianapolis, Elmira College, University of California, Merced, Nova Southeastern's BSMD program were some of the few that got added on. But next year, there will be another BSMD program added to the ranks. DePaul University in Chicago will be pairing with Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science. It's going to be an 8-year program. To qualify, students do have to have a 3.8 unweighted GPA, 1350 on the SAT, or 29 on the ACT. They do have other requirements, like you had to have had like 4 years of math and calculus and science and things like that. So check out their website and you can get more information about the program requirements and if you qualify. But a lot of undergrad universities are starting to reevaluate their testing policies this year. I know Nicole and I talked about this in a previous podcast when we talked about like SAT, ACT testing plans, but a lot of schools have been reevaluating their 5-year trial that started during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there are a handful of BSMD programs that are going to be test optional and will remain test optional. And those are going to be Brown, Case, University of Arizona, UC Merced, which is actually test blind, not even test optional, University of Connecticut, UPenn, and University of Rochester. Now, one program that used to be test optional was Penn State's program, but now they do require test scores, and students have to have either a 1470 on the SAT or a 32 on the ACT to be considered. Now, that being said, the typical accepted student will usually have a much higher SAT. I think it's like a 1570 on the SAT and an ACT of a 36. They did interview kids at like a much wider range. I think I saw on their website, it was between like 1510. Now, if you are deciding if you should go test optional or not, as I just said, kind of look at what the minimum requirements are and how much higher above them you are. And as you make your choice, just remember you can submit your scores to some programs and choose not to submit it to others. I was looking it up before this podcast, but I did see that University of Rochester quite literally says, if you believe that your standardized test scores help reinforce the strength of your overall application to REMS, you should submit them. So take some time to evaluate that. Of course, at Moon Prep, we can help you kind of decide those things too, but it doesn't have to be like you have to submit to all. You can choose which ones you want to do. Now, another big change that we saw was a huge increased use of the waitlist. I did see more students than I ever had before really get waitlisted. And honestly, I think BSMD programs do this because, of course, they're getting hundreds, if not thousands of applications. And a lot of these students that are accepted are top students. You know, as we just discussed, they probably have really high SATs and GPAs. And so they will be most likely getting offers from Ivy Leagues or maybe full ride scholarships to a private or public school. We never know. I think that this is why BSMD programs are kind of utilizing the waitlist for both interview spots as well as actual spots in the program, helps them manage their class sizes more effectively. Some programs that we noticed were utilizing the waitlist this year were Drexel, IU Indianapolis, all of the Albany medical colleges, so RPI, Siena, and Union, UMKC, which I did see had interview like waitlist spots as well as waitlist spots for their actual BAMD program, University of South Carolina, and University of Southern Indiana were some of the programs that we saw were using the waitlist. Now, some of them got off the wait list after May 1st. So it just kind of depends on when they'll find out. What I have seen though is if they are finding out after May 1st, is a lot of the times they'll have like 48, 72 hours or so to decide if they want to accept that spot or not. And if you don't respond in time or you say no thanks, then of course they'll move on to the next student. Now, some schools do not use the waitlist at all. Like I think it was Case Western, I had a student who was like thinking about withdrawing their interview spot from the program. And the school did say that if the student does withdraw from the interview, they are not going to like replace them with another student. So, it just kind of depends on the program, and kind of goes to show too, if you get accepted to your ED school, it is really important to withdraw your name from consideration from these programs, because you might be taking an interview spot from a student who actually would love to go to that program when you have, you won't be able to go to that program. So kind of take it, be a little bit considerate of others when you're taking those waitlist spots. Another change we did see was changes in BSMD program requirements. Every year we do see like kind of this changing where BSMD programs are reevaluating their requirements. And that's because they want to make sure they still are getting a strong batch of applications. And so sometimes this means the program requirements are increased. But actually this year, Nova Southeastern did lower its requirements from a 1540 on the SAT and 35 on the ACT to a 1520 and a 34 respectively. Nova Southeastern still does have some of the higher SAT and ACT requirements I've seen, but they are a little bit easier, hopefully a little bit more accessible to students. And then one other big change that I think will probably devastate some people is that Case Western's, their PPSP program, it did quietly add to its website that students in the program will now be required to take the MCAT. So before they didn't require the MCAT, so this will probably be a pretty big shock to students. Now students have to get a score of 511 or higher with all subsection scores above 124. So that's probably one of the bigger changes that we saw this admission cycle. And then I just got two more changes for you. One big change we have noticed is more BSMD programs are using in-person interviews. So once again, kind of this is a residue of the pandemic, but a lot of programs during the pandemic did shift to virtual interviews. I think in part it was because it's, tough. Not only does the parent have to go to the interview with the student and take off time of work, but of course, like the student might have to be missing 2 days, 3 days of school. And it can be really, really challenging. So I think a lot of them did switch for that reason. There are some drawbacks to virtual interviews because, of course, then you don't get to see the campus. It can be a little bit harder to connect with your interviewer too virtually. So I think there are pros and cons. But in the past couple of years, we have seen some schools revert back to requiring students to come in and interview on campus. So a small little list of programs that had in-person interviews this year was NJIT, Missouri Southern State University, that's a BSDO program, University of Cincinnati, Nova Southeastern University, so it's going to be both the BSMD and the BSDO programs there, Baylor, University of Houston, and I'm sure a lot others. I was talking to some of my other counselors and you cannot remember anymore, but I'm sure a lot of other kids did do some in-person interviews. So this is becoming a little bit more popular, I think, just as we put the pandemic in the rearview mirror a little bit more too. And then I think the last big major change that we have been seeing over the past few years is an increased interest in BSDO programs. And I think this is really stemming from like 2020, once again, kind of a pandemic era thing, but this wasn't, a result of the pandemic by any means. It was announced years earlier, but essentially the big change was that all the residencies for both MD and DO graduates were merged and are now all accredited under the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education. And this is regardless of whether or not it's MD or DO specific. And so this meant that MDs and DOs could be applying to the same residency programs through the National Resident Matching Program match. And the goal of this really was to increase access for DOs to residencies that had previously been MD only, and hopefully to create a more universal standard for medical training. Now this year, we did see that DO seniors matched at a rate of 92.6%, which is at an all-time high and up 3.5% from 2021. More DO seniors matched into anesthesiology, neurology, orthopedic surgery, pathology, and other competitive specialties than they had in previous years. So I think just because BSMD programs are so competitive, we are seeing more students starting to consider BSDO. And I think that this merger has helped increase interest in osteopathic medicine. And I think I probably have said this before, but when I first started doing this in like 2018, I didn't have very many students interested in BSDO. But now I'd say like, anywhere from 40 to 60% of my students each year does have at least like 1 to 3 programs on their list. So we really have seen this trend. Just helps increase their chances of getting accepted to like a direct program. So yeah, I think that's kind of everything about like the changing landscape of BSMD programs. I mean, things are definitely changing. Kids are applying to more schools, more programs, more different types of programs. Requirements are changing. What they're looking for is kind of changing too. So as you're going along and building your college list, take these kind of things in consideration. Make sure that you do still fit the requirements of what they're looking for. Make sure that the requirements that they have to stay in the program are still what you're looking for too. And, use this as kind of a guideline as you're going through this process. Every year things do change. So it's great that you're staying on top of the news. Yeah, I think that's all I got for you. Thanks for sticking with just me today. And in the next 2 weeks, I'll have some other fantastic guests on with me. But yeah, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys all next time. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to like and subscribe to get more BSMD and college admissions news. See you next time.